Hi friends, it's Sarah from Maine SNAP-Ed. I am back again to see you all for another healthy foods lesson. If you remember the last video I sent you, we were talking all about flower vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower, and we talked about the different parts of the plants, the roots, the stems, the leaves, the flowers. Well, today we're going to talk about a whole other group of foods. And these foods, I bet you have seen a lot of, but maybe you have never tasted before. So we're gonna learn a little bit more about them today. The healthy food that we are talking about today comes from a family called the gourd family. And the gourd family has a whole bunch of different foods in it. But we are gonna talk about winter squash. Right here are a few examples of winter squash, and we're going to talk more about these in just a second. Winter squash are a group of fruits. I know we think that they look like vegetables to us, but these are actually fruits, and I'm going to tell you why in just a minute. But these are two examples of winter squashes that you may have seen before. This one right here is one of my favorites, and I also like this one too. This one, the green and orange one, can see kind of has a shape like this. This one is called an acorn squash because it's kind of shaped like an acorn, isn't it? And this one is called a butternut squash. And these two squashes and all the other winter squashes have a hard, thick skin that aren't so great to eat. We need to peel them or not eat the skin when we cook them, but their skin helps protect the inside, which means these squash can grow in the cold weather, which is why we call them winter squash. A lot of other foods that are in the same family, like zucchini and even things like cucumber and melons, those are all part of the same family, but those have very thin skins. So that means that they have to grow in nice, warm, sunny weather. They can't live in the cold winter weather, but these squash can, which means we can harvest them later in the year. So we can get these in kind of the cold weather months. And you can find winter squash in lots of different places. You can find them fresh and whole like this at the grocery store, or maybe at the food pantry or at restaurants. You can also find cans of winter squash. And this is a can of pumpkin. Did you all know that pumpkin is a type of winter squash? And I use canned pumpkin to make different recipes. I made a pumpkin pie, and I also made pumpkin pancakes, which were super, super yummy. All these types of winter squash are so healthy for our bodies, just like some of the other foods that we've learned about. These squashes are really, really high in vitamin C. Does anybody remember what vitamin C helps our bodies do? Right, vitamin C helps our bodies fight off germs. So can you give me your protective shield that's gonna help protect our bodies from those germs that are trying to get in? That's the vitamin C protecting us from these foods. And another thing that these squash have a lot of is vitamin A. And vitamin A is really, really healthy for our eyes. It helps us to see really well. So I want you all to put on your super goggles and see how far you can look after you've had your squash with all of that vitamin A. Awesome. And the last thing that these squash have that's so healthy for us is fiber. Fiber helps us to feel full. It helps the food to move through our bodies. So I want you all to rub your tummies because you're all nice and full of all of that healthy fiber. Now, if you remember a few minutes ago, I told you that winter squashes, like this acorn squash, are actually fruits, not vegetables. And I said that we were gonna find out why. So I'm gonna cut open this squash and we're gonna see what's inside that makes it a fruit. And just a reminder, this is a very sharp knife, and this is something that you definitely want to have a grown-up help you with at home. Definitely not something that's safe for us to do without a grown-up, okay? So I'm gonna cut this open and keep a close look on what's inside. Let's see. Do you see what's inside this acorn squash? Exactly. All of those are seeds. And if a food has seeds inside, that's a hint that it is a fruit and not a vegetable. So that's how we know that these squashes are fruits. So now that we have learned a little bit more about winter squash and some of the healthy nutrients, all of those vitamins that are inside, and we learned that they have seeds inside and that's why they're a fruit, I want us to look at some of the different varieties of winter squash. There are so many different kinds, and I only had a couple to show you today. Remember, I had the butternut squash, the acorn squash that we cut open, and the can of pumpkin. But there are a lot more that I just didn't have in my house. So we're gonna play a little game where I'm going to give you clues, and there are gonna be 2 pictures of different squashes. And I want you to try to guess if I'm talking about squash number 1 or squash number 2. So you're gonna listen to my clues and you're gonna hold up your fingers, either 1 for squash 1 or 2 for squash 2, okay? Let's get started with my first clue. I am long and thin with a shape almost like a zucchini. I have a light yellow skin with orange and green stripes. My skin is so thin that you can actually eat it, so you don't have to peel me. Do you think I'm talking about squash 1 or squash 2? Good, squash number 2. And that type of squash is called delicata. Can you all say delicata? Very good. Squash number 2, are you ready? I bet you know me. I am the most popular of all the winter squashes. Did you know that some of me are so big that you can carve me into fun faces, or you can make me into a pie for dessert? Do you think I'm talking about squash 1 or squash 2? Good, squash number 1, a pumpkin. Remember I had the can of pumpkin? Very good. Now we're on to our next squash that we're gonna guess. All right, you ready for the clue? I have bright yellow skin and my insides are a lighter yellow. I have an oval shape, kind of like a watermelon. If you cut me open, I look like spaghetti inside. Do you think that's squash 1 or squash 2? Squash number 1, that's called a spaghetti squash. And when you cut it open, it looks like little spaghetti noodles inside. I like to eat spaghetti squash just like I do regular spaghetti. I put tomato sauce on it, sometimes meatballs, super yummy. Now that we learned all about these super healthy and delicious winter squashes, I want us to do a little exercise, get a little physical activity in, right? Because we know it's important to eat all of these healthy foods, but it's also important for us to exercise our bodies, our muscles, and our heart, right? So we are going to play a little game of pretend. We were talking all about these winter squashes, and what's cool about them, one of the things that's cool about them is that we can grow them in Maine. So if you ever go to a farm around here, you might see them growing in the fields, which is really, really neat. So I want us to pretend that we are going to a farm and you are gonna look all over the farm for the biggest squash you can find. Maybe it's a huge pumpkin, maybe it's an enormous butternut squash, maybe it's a super heavy acorn squash, but I want you all to stand up and I want you to pretend like you're in that field at that farm, and I want you to look for that squash. Look, look, look. All right, I found mine. I'm picking it up. Squat down deep, pick it up. Oh, mine is a super, super heavy pumpkin. And I'm gonna hold my pumpkin and I'm gonna do 5 squats with my heavy pumpkin. Hold your squash and let's squat together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Ooh, it's so heavy. 4, and 1 more, 5. Awesome. All right, now we're gonna pick our squash up over our heads. So get your arms underneath your big squash and press it over your head 5 times. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, let's put our squash squash down. It's so, so heavy. Now that we exercised our legs and our arms, let's give us a good stretch. So your squash is down on the ground. I want you to reach down and touch it with your hands. Ready? Let's do that 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Awesome. Now, let's pretend we took our squash home. I took my pumpkin home, I cut it up, and I made it into a big bowl of pumpkin soup. Now, I want you all to pretend like you have your squash that you made into a soup, and make your hands into a bowl like this. And I want you to put your bowl of soup right up close to your mouth, right up close to your nose. And I want you to take a big, deep breath through your nose and smell that delicious soup. You ready? And then you're gonna blow it out like you're cooling off your hot, hot soup. Let's do that a few more times. Smell in that delicious soup and cool it off. One more and cool it off. All right, friends, that was so good. Good job. All right, friends, you all did such a good job today listening and learning about these winter squashes. And I want to know if you are going to be able to have a chance to try one of these new foods. Maybe you're not going to be able to taste it at home or at school, and that's okay, but maybe keep your eye out for them if you ever are at the grocery store or the food pantry or a restaurant. If you see one of these foods, maybe you could ask your grown-up if you could try it, because you never know, you might really like it. So I want to hear all about it. Let me know if you get to try one of these foods. All right, friends, I will see you next time. Have a great day. Bye.